Okay, I would like to call to order the June 22nd, 2010 meeting of the Glendale Redevelopment Agency. Can we have a roll call, please?
Agency members: Raymond.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Sheriff Friedman.
Here. Can we hear your report, please?
The agenda for the June 22nd, 2010 regular meeting of the Glendale Redevelopment Agency was posted on Thursday, June 17, 2010 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. And what's next?
Next item is approval of minutes.
So moved. Second.
Okay, the minutes are approved. What is next, please?
Next is oral communication. Discussion is limited time is not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Members of the redevelopment agency may question or respond to a speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The matter may be referred to staff through the executive director for investigation and report.
Thank you. I have no cards. Is there anyone who wanted to speak? Seeing nobody, we will move on. What's next, please?
There was one
I have
card.
a card for 6A, which
6A.
is the business agenda.
On the business agenda is Director of Administrative Services regarding adoption of the 2010-2011 Glendale Redevelopment Agency budget. 6A1 is a resolution adopting a budget in the amount of $34,123,642.
Thank you. And who are we going to for a presentation? Mr. Elliott. Welcome.
Mr. Elliott. Yet again, excuse me, Madam Chair, members of the agency, the item before you today is official adoption of the budget presented last week and during all the study sessions this year. I will note that we have attached all the revenue sources and the expenditure categories within the body of the report for all the funds under the control of the redevelopment agency. With that, we're available for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I see no yes, Mr. Najarian.
Question. Remind us, Mr. Elliott, we spoke about the implications of the state grabbing our, what was it, $11 million. And what's the outlook for, number one, getting that back? You can stop laughing now.
And
then prospectively looking ahead, what are we really in for as an agency in that regard?
Let me take that if I can. I was in Sacramento just last week at a California Redevelopment Association Board of Directors meeting. We had an update on that. As you know, the case filed by the California Redevelopment Association against the state to block the take this year of the $11 million from Glendale, almost $2 billion statewide. We received a verdict at trial court that was adverse to the CRA. So the various agencies had to write their checks, us included. That item is being appealed by the California Redevelopment Association, probably at least a year before we get a determination of that. On the other hand, the California Redevelopment Association did receive a positive decision by the courts on its application for attorney's fees in the case that they filed the previous year to block the take of $350 million statewide, which it did win. However, the state has appealed that, so we've yet to see whether or not the attorney fees will be coming back to the CRA. But we had to write our $11 million check under protest. Those monies were sent to the county auditor controller so that we would not have what's called the death penalty imposed on us. Agencies that do not pay that money to the state have imposed on them a restriction for them to conduct any further business except the payment of debt and the carrying out of existing contracts, so you wouldn't be able to enter into any new projects. Also limitations on administration. So the outcome this year is rather bleak. It's at least a year before we'll know whether or not we're going to be successful in the appeal. The biggest difficulty is we don't know what's on the horizon for us. The state has built into its budget projections another take in the upcoming year, $350 million statewide, another $2 million for Glendale. There's every expectation that when the Big Five get together, as they get down to actually they're past now the date for adopting a budget, so it may be September is what we were told at my recent meeting. Could be as late as September, October, before the state is finally able to hammer out a budget. Past years have taught us what happens is the Big Five go into a closed room and hammer out these deals. Our concern is what happens with that $350 million take. At this point, the governor is not proposing any further takes of redevelopment, but it becomes an awfully tempting little egg to move from $350 million to $2 billion when you have the kinds of problems the state is facing, and you've got everything from education to welfare to parks that you're competing with. So that's the real fear, is we could again see another take as they get down to the final minutes of their budget deliberations. our agency, frankly, with another take of this magnitude, would be out of business. Would be out of business for quite some time. I think, frankly, we made a mistake in the current year of not identifying the projects that money could have gone for, because as a result, when we tried to be very practical and very responsible, and with the threat on the horizon, we essentially set the money aside, and you all didn't allocate it for projects. I think, though, it would have driven a better point home to our legislators if they could have seen what projects weren't going to be done now that that money was taken. There's lots of projects that could have been. For that reason, I'm recommending the upcoming year that we essentially don't put the money aside, and that instead we allocate that for projects so our legislators will know that if they take that money, there are things that will not get done in the community. And as you know, we've had a very difficult time getting a receptive ear from our state senator. We are going to be meeting with our new assembly member and driving home the point that these monies are monies that go into infrastructure and facilities here in Glendale. They stay home. They don't go into the fiscal abyss of Sacramento. So for now, the news hasn't been very good. And frankly, we're concerned about the news on a going forward basis, but we're keeping a very close eye to it, watching it, and I anticipate that the California Redevelopment Association will file another lawsuit in the upcoming year on the $350 million, and indeed, if there's a larger take from the state, that'll be included. So that's the update.
Okay, keep us posted, please.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I'd like Mr. Elliott to talk about, give a little more detail on the maintenance and operations part of the budget.
Before he does that, if you'll just allow me to respond to what Mr. Starbird just laid out for us in terms of the redevelopment takeaway from the state, I just wanted to add a little more commentary, which is that redevelopment agencies are trusted with reducing blight or eliminating blight, but also economic and job creation is a way to deal with that blight. And at a time when everyone's paying a lot of lip service to job creation and economic development, I would just ask, who do you think would do a better job creating jobs and economic development in the city of Glendale? Do you think it's Sacramento, or do you think it's this agency who is responsive to the public and right on the ground with the businesses that work here in this city? And I just believe that it's a tremendous mistake to not allow local agencies to do that real economic development and real job creation. And we have been completely handcuffed now in our ability to do that. And it's really a shame that we haven't had more leadership and more workable and productive solutions from Sacramento. And instead, the very body, the governmental body that should be helping us are the ones that are crippling us. So I just wanted to make that comment and turn it back to you, Mr. Quintero, for your question.
Mr. Elliott, just think the public would be interested in
the specific question on
Maintenance
the
and
maintenance operations
part of the budget.
It pretty much is the catch-all for anything that's not salary and benefit related or specifically capital outlay. It'll include items, consulting services, or any other type of funds that it generally gets lumped into M&O.
If I could just add, we have also, the state takes, those fall into our maintenance and operations funds as well. So that's why you'll see a variation from prior years, because they have that $11 million this year and then $2.2 million next year.
Okay. If there's no more questions from the dais, I'm going to go to the public. Herbert Milano is my one and only card.
Redevelopment Agency Chair Friedman, members of the Redevelopment Agency and city staff, my name is Herbert Milano. I want to segue on a couple of things that were just mentioned with regard to the state budget crisis. I think that it behooves everyone to also take a look at the impact on the pension obligations of the state of California and how they are impacting the budget overall. Some recent numbers that I've seen that look at the overall obligation for those pensions is about $500 billion. The number of problems within the budget of the state of California are too numerous to spend a couple of minutes on it, but it's just not the only problem. It's one among several problems having to do with revenue and expenditures. But one of the things that we all need is clarity with regard to how the information is provided to the public. And I'd like to see for this agency something along these lines. we looked at this particular report that you have before you, and you see these separate funds with regard to the salaries. So we get the salaries and benefits, but we get them separated out by fund as opposed to a consolidated number. And I think that it would be better for us to receive a number that looks at the total salaries for all the funds together for this particular agency. The total pension benefits altogether, separate from the other benefits, as a number so that we can track it. And then all the other benefits, health and everything else combined for a second line. Now, M&O will be the next one, and the last one will be the capital improvements. The next thing, if we were to have a separate page, just like they do in Irvine, we would like to see, for example, some performance measures with regard to the participation agreements that the city has had and those developments. For example, the number of permanent jobs per 10,000 square feet that were generated as a result of the initiatives by this agency. The total commercial development, the square footage that was built, the percentage of that development that remains vacant, the total number of residential development in terms of square feet, the percentage of vacant commercial space, the percentage of vacant retail space, and the number of shuttered retail establishments. I think that we need a way to put a pulse on how this agency is investing these funds and what kind of results we're getting from them. And I think that if we have a set of measures that we can look at from year to year, we're able to determine if we're really aiding and improving and contributing towards the very same goals that you had established earlier. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Lanzafane, do we have some sort of, do we generate reports of redevelopment in terms of the money that's spent and the return in terms of how much retail we create, how much office space we create, businesses that the redevelopment agency brings in? Is there a way to track that?
What we have done, and we're required by law, is every 5 years we generate an implementation plan. The agency reviewed it last, I think, in February or March of this year. In that, we will list all of the projects that we're engaged in, the number of jobs that are created, the anticipated tax increment, and those elements of blight that have been eliminated. We update that plan once in that term, that 5-year term. So typically every 2.5 years you're looking at that. We try to go back a reasonable period of time, but we have not looked from 1972 to the current, the number of jobs, the number of property tax, the transit occupancy tax that we've developed from our projects. We haven't done that. In every 5-year plan, we do take a look back and we try and project that forward.
Well, the fact that we have tax increment must show something as well, right? I mean, the more success we have, the more the tax increment's generated.
The more growth you have in your project area, yes. The more tax increment, the more value that you accrue, the more tax increment that comes. And I don't think certainly in my tenure, I don't think we've ever had a negative in our central project area. San Fernando was a different story in the early 90s.
It might be helpful at some point to see year to year that tax increment. That would give an indication of what's been generated in terms of new business and new growth and new taxes.
Based on tax increment, yes, and I think we can obtain that information from our tax increment consultant that tracks that. We typically go back, I think, 13 quarters. We can set it for a different parameter if you like.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? All right, then do we have a motion?
Move 6A1.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call?
Agency members: Raymond,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Chair Friedman.
Yes. Thank you. And what's next?
Any agency member or staff comments?
I see no comments. Do we have a motion? Do we have any new business? No new business. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you.